9:30 p.m. The Bahamas. The water is warm and still, the kind of still that makes sound carry for miles across the surface. That's why they heard it. Residents living near the Hopetown anchorage weren't looking for anything unusual that night, but what echoed across the water stopped them cold. A massive heavy splash, the kind that doesn't come from a fish, doesn't come from a wave, doesn't come from anything innocent. It came from the direction of a luxury sailboat called the Soulmate. And then, flares. But not fired upward toward the sky the way a desperate husband would fire them, screaming for help. These flares were fired horizontally, low and slow across the surface of the water. Almost like someone was checking, scanning, making sure nobody was out there watching. There was. This is the story of Lynette Hooker, a woman who disappeared in the dark ocean, and the husband who had every reason to make sure she was never found. Before we go any further, where are you watching from right now? Drop your city and state in the comments. Let's see how far this story reaches. To the outside world, Brian and Lynette Hooker had figured something out that most people never do. They had built a life that looked like a dream. A YouTube channel documenting their sailing adventures together. Warm light, clear water, the two of them living freely while their audience watched and wished they could trade places. Thousands of people tuned in to follow their journey. Brian always at the helm, confident, in control. Lynette always there, smiling, present, glowing. They called their sailboat the Soulmate. And for 25 years, Brian and Lynette had been together. 2.5 decades of what appeared, from the outside, to be a partnership built on adventure and love. They had a home, a community of followers, a reputation. But there was someone who saw behind all of it. Jordan Plants lived directly across the street from the Hookers. She watched them come and go for years. She watched the couple that YouTube loved. And she watched something else entirely. Something the camera never captured, something their subscribers never saw. She stayed quiet for a long time. But when the FBI showed up at her door, Jordan Plants started talking. And what she told federal agents would unravel the most carefully constructed lie Brian Hooker had ever built. If you are new here, hit that subscribe button right now. This case is one you do not want to lose track of. It is moving fast. The trip to the Bahamas wasn't a vacation. It's important to understand that. Because Brian Hooker would later frame it that way, a romantic sailing excursion, two people out on the open water, enjoying their retirement life. But the people who knew Lynette best understood something entirely different was happening on that boat. For 25 years, Lynette Hooker had been living inside a cycle. It was a cycle that many survivors of domestic abuse would recognize immediately, the kind that moves in slow rotations, like a tide going in and out. Brian would become volatile, the verbal abuse would escalate, and then it would turn physical, and Lynette would run. She ran to her mother's house in Florida, not once, not twice, repeatedly, over the span of years, sometimes disappearing for months at a time, just to put distance between herself and the man she was legally married to. Her mother, Darlene, knew the pattern. She had watched her daughter make that drive more times than any mother should ever have to count. But Lynette always went back. That's what made this particular trip so significant. Investigators believe this sailing trip to the Bahamas was Lynette's attempt to manage a situation that had once again escalated dangerously out of control. She was not on vacation. She was in survival mode on a boat in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean with no car to grab. No highway to the Soulmate sailed out of Florida waters and into the Bahamas. And Lynette Hooker was never seen again. Here is what Brian Hooker told police. Here is the story he rehearsed and repeated with the kind of detail that is supposed to sound convincing. He said that on the night Lynette disappeared, the two of them had gone out together on the dinghy, a small, 8-foot boat used to travel from the anchored sailboat to shore. He claimed that somewhere in the dark water, Lynette lost her footing and slipped over the side. She went under. And in the chaos and panic, the boat's keys fell into the ocean with her. With no motor and no way to call for help, Brian says he rowed. He rowed for 8 agonizing hours through the pitch-black Bahamian night until he finally reached shore. 8 hours, alone, in the dark, his wife gone beneath the surface. That was Brian's story. And at first glance, it might sound like a tragedy, a terrible accident in a remote location, a grieving husband who nearly died trying to get help. But the witnesses near Hopetown Anchorage had a completely different account of that night. They heard the splash. Not the soft sound of someone slipping, a massive heavy impact on the water. The kind of sound a significant weight makes when it hits the surface with force. And moments after that splash echoed across the anchorage, the flares appeared, not fired skyward, fired sideways, horizontally, low across the water. One witness described it clearly. The flares were moving parallel to the surface, not arcing upward into the sky the way emergency signals are designed to be used, the way any innocent, terrified man lost at sea would use them. I want to know what you think right now. Does Brian's story hold up to you? Drop your read on this in the comments. Innocent accident or calculated cover story? But here is what made the witness accounts devastating rather than merely suspicious. Brian had no idea his yacht was watching him. The Soulmate's automatic tracking system had been logging data the entire time. When federal investigators extracted that data, it didn't show a man adrift on an 8-foot dinghy, helplessly rowing for 8 hours. It showed active navigation. The vessel was moving, deliberately, purposefully, through the shallow mangrove channels of Elbow Cay. Brian was not drifting. Brian was driving. He was navigating. At the exact time he claimed to be lost and helpless on a tiny rowboat, the GPS data shows him actively operating the vessel. His alibi didn't just crack under the weight of the evidence. It collapsed entirely. The secret evidence bags that U.S. Coast Guard investigators secured from the Bahamas contained something investigators had been waiting weeks to examine. Federal agents located and seized the exact 8-foot boat Brian Hooker claimed was at the center of Lynette's disappearance. They transported it to a secure warehouse facility and began the kind of methodical forensic examination that doesn't miss things. And what they found, or more precisely, what they did not find, sent shockwaves through the investigation. The backup outboard engine was missing. This was not a minor detail. This was a piece of equipment that had always been documented as part of the dinghy's standard inventory. It was cataloged, it was confirmed, and now it was gone, completely absent from the boat, with no explanation from Brian about where it went. Investigators began building a theory. A heavy outboard engine dropped into deep water functions like an anchor. It sinks. It pulls whatever is attached to it down into the depths where sonar drones may never reach, where currents move slow and cold, where things stay hidden. It was a horrifying theory, but it was consistent with everything else investigators were learning about Brian Hooker, specifically about his history of making things disappear. Before this trip, Brian had been fired from a corporate position at AT&T. The reason? He had secretly rigged a system to mask the GPS tracking device on his company work van. He knew how tracking systems operated. He knew how to manipulate digital footprints. He had done it before, professionally, and he had done it deliberately. A man who once beat a GPS system to hide his location knows exactly what data leaves a trail and what data can be erased. The problem for Brian is that the Soulmate's tracking system was not his to control, and it recorded everything. Do not go anywhere. We are just getting to the part that is going to change everything you thought you knew about this case. Make sure you are subscribed so the next update hits your feed the moment it drops. Jordan Plants had watched the Hookers for years. She lived right across the street. She saw Brian's truck in the driveway. She saw Lynette's car come and go. She saw the way they moved around each other in that house. And she saw things that a neighbor across the street was never supposed to see that told her, long before any of this, that something was deeply wrong inside that marriage. When the FBI came to her door, she did not hesitate. Jordan told federal agents what she had witnessed over the years, that Brian was violent, verbally, physically, consistently, that Lynette lived in a state of constant tension, always bracing, always managing, always calculating how to stay safe in her own home, that the YouTube channel, the sailing life, the smiling couple, none of it matched what was happening behind closed doors. She told them about the times Lynette would vanish from the neighborhood for weeks, sometimes months, not on vacation, not visiting friends, running to her mother in Florida because staying meant putting herself in danger, and then coming back, always coming back, because that is what this cycle does. It convinces the person inside it that going back is safer than staying gone. Jordan's account gave investigators the domestic violence history they needed to build a full portrait of this marriage. 25 years of abuse. 25 years of a public image that had been carefully, deliberately constructed to hide the truth. And then there was one more thing Jordan mentioned. Before the trip, she had witnessed altercations between Brian and Lynette that were severe enough to stay with her, bad enough that she remembered them clearly, months later when federal agents were standing on her porch asking questions. The FBI didn't just write down what Jordan said. They went door to door through the entire neighborhood, seizing Amazon Ring security camera footage, pulling archived video from every residential network they could access, looking for the physical proof of those pre-trip altercations captured on video. If this case is hitting you hard, share this video with someone right now. The more people watching, the more pressure on the system to move fast. And if you have not subscribed yet, one tap. That is all it takes. Think about someone in your life, someone you suspect might be in a situation like Lynette's. Sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is simply pay attention. Drop a heart in the comments if this story is making you think. Within days of Lynette's disappearance, before investigators could lock down the island and restrict travel, Brian Hooker left the Bahamas. He had a reason ready. His mother, he told people, was terminally ill. It was a family emergency. He had no choice but to get back to the United States immediately. It sounded urgent. It sounded human. It sounded like the kind of thing that, in the chaos of a missing person investigation, might get waved through without too much scrutiny. The FBI called Darlene, Lynette's mother, and asked her directly about Brian's mother. Darlene confirmed what investigators already suspected. Brian's mother was not sick. There was no terminal illness. There was no emergency. It was a fabricated exit strategy, a calculated lie built specifically to get Brian off that island before the Bahamian authorities and federal investigators could formally restrict his movement and seize his passport. He made it out. He crossed back into the United States and disappeared into the country. Not to a hospital, not to a sick mother's bedside, but simply away, out of reach. Unavailable to Lynette's family, who were desperately trying to reach him. Unavailable to investigators pushing for answers. Somewhere in America, a man who had just watched his wife disappear from a boat in the Bahamas was roaming completely free. Lynette's family sat by their phones. They called. They texted. Nothing came back. Brian Hooker had gone quiet, but the evidence had not. Right now, federal investigators are working this case from multiple directions simultaneously. Door to door, they are sweeping Brian's neighborhood, pulling ring camera footage, accessing residential security networks, building a video archive of every recorded interaction that happened in and around the Hooker property in the weeks before that sailing trip. They are looking for what Jordan Plants described. They are looking for what Lynette's own behavior in those final weeks suggested. They want the evidence of those altercations on video, and they are not stopping until they find it. At the same time, forensic analysts are working through the GPS and digital data pulled from Brian's electronic devices and the Soulmate's onboard tracking system. Every timestamp, every coordinate, every moment his story says one thing and the data says another. And here is what the federal prosecutors are building toward. Lynette Hooker's body has not been recovered. The ocean's vast and the Bahamas' waters run deep. But the FBI does not need a body to secure a murder conviction. They have done it before, and they are extremely good at it. Every piece of survival gear that should have been in that water, the life vests, the emergency equipment, the supplies Brian claimed floated away in the chaos, has completely vanished, not drifted, not washed ashore. Vanished, as in, someone removed it before help arrived, as in. The scene was cleaned before the first responder ever set foot on that vessel. The missing outboard engine, the GPS data, the horizontal flares, the fabricated sick mother, the neighbor's testimony, the 25-year history of domestic violence, the ring camera footage being collected right now. Every single piece of this puzzle is locking into place. And when prosecutors lay it all out, when they build the picture the way federal homicide cases are built, Brian Hooker is going to find himself standing in a courtroom with no alibi, no credibility, and no explanation that holds up to any of it. He is still out there right now. But the walls are not just closing in. They are almost shut. Lynette Hooker got on a sailboat called the Soulmate. She trusted it to bring her somewhere safe. It didn't. What federal investigators now know, her husband lied about where he was. He lied about the engine. He lied about his sick mother. He built a YouTube marriage that looked like love and lived something that looked like a trap. And Lynette spent 25 years running from it and running back to it, over and over, until the night on the Hopetown anchorage when she ran out of ocean to run to. Justice for Lynette is not guaranteed, but it is being built, piece by piece, coordinate by coordinate, neighbor by neighbor, by people who are not going to stop. Neither are we. If this story matters to you, hit like right now. It takes 1 second and it tells YouTube this case deserves to be seen. Subscribe so you never miss the moment Brian Hooker is arrested. And drop one word in the comments, just one word, that describes how this story made you feel. See you in the next one.